You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. This week, I'm joined by three-time National Coach of the Year, Kirsten Bernthal Booth. Kirsten is the head volleyball coach at Creighton University. In 2002, she inherited a 3-23 team, and since then, steadily built Creighton Volleyball into one of the most successful, consistent programs in the country. Kirsten has led Creighton Volleyball to an unprecedented run of success, winning 8 consecutive Big East titles and reaching the NCAA tournament in 11 of the last 12 seasons. In our conversation, we explored what Kirsten learned as a young leader when she took over the program at the age of 27 and everything she has done since then to build Creighton Volleyball into the powerhouse program it is today. If you lead a group of people in anything and want to achieve big results, then this conversation is for you. So let's pull the tarp and get straight to three-time National Coach of the Year, Kirsten Bernthal Booth. Kirsten, I am so excited to get into your story. Where I want to begin, you are the architect of one of the nation's best volleyball programs. The team that you inherited, however, was 3-23 back in 2002. I want you to take me back to settling into the role as the head coach at Creighton. What were the first couple of things that you did to get things going in the right direction?
Well, I hired well. I say that, but I think I was very deliberate on how I hired. I think sometimes head coaches get way too much acclaim for what they're doing when in fact we have to be great. I think you have to surround yourself by people that are great and can fill in the areas that we don't do as well. So, I was 27 at the time and I was a kid. And so I think I recognized that if I was going to get parents to send their daughters to come play for me, I needed what I would say at the time was an adult in the room. And so I actively looked for someone that maybe was a little bit older than I was. In fact, my 2 finalists were both older than I was and had more credibility, and made a great hire with a guy about 10 years older than me. He was local to the area, but had lots of connections and had great success. And then the other thing that I did was at the time, Creighton didn't have a lot of credibility in volleyball in this area, but Nebraska did. And Nebraska still does if you follow volleyball. So Nebraska volleyball is huge in this area. And I was a GA position at the time. And I went and literally cold called Husker former athletes to see if they were interested in the GA position. And one of them, and I did some research to make sure that they were good people and things along those lines. But one of them was Angie Oxley at the time. And she had just come off a national championship in 2000. She'd spent a year at the NCAA and she was wrapping that up. And I called her and I knew people that knew her and had said great things. And she was going to actually probably go to Florida as a volunteer and work in their academic advising area, and convinced her. And Angie has been my assistant for now 19 seasons.
That is an incredible story. I want to go back first to the first thing you said, Kirsten, and that was about this notion of hiring, some adults in the room. Like you said, you were 27 when you had the opportunity to come to Creighton. That's something that I get a lot of questions about from people all the time. In my career, I have regularly been, for a long time, I was maybe the youngest person in a lot of conference rooms and the youngest person in a lot of meetings. And a lot of times you do get I get questions from young professionals and they say, if I don't have as many years of experience as this person, or I don't have as many years of experience as this person, how can I make sure that I'm heard? How can I add value? What's your advice to young people based upon your experiences?
In my experience, so I took over a junior college program when I was 23 as a head coach. My path is pretty different. I've never been an assistant for the most part, maybe like at the high school level when I was in grad school, but I've always been a head coach. And at that point in my career, I was far less chummy, I guess I would say, with my athletes than I am now. Now, my athletes would not say I'm chummy with my athletes now, but I ask a lot more about their personal life now because I think those lines happen. I'm now very close to 50, unfortunately. And, I'm a mother and I have, they don't want to hang out with me. So now I have to really work hard to relationship build. When I was 23, I didn't, what's the natural thing for college students to talk about with another 23-year-old? Where I party, what's going on with their boyfriends, things like that. Well, I knew that was not what I wanted my relationship to them to be about, nor did I want my program to be about that. So I was really, really clear. If anything, I was above the line to an extreme, not asking about things that I thought were inappropriate that would cross the line. It was not my job to be chummy friends with them. I wanted them to respect and like what we were doing, but I was really diligent about that at a young age.
You alluded to it a little bit there, but did it limit your ability to build those quality relationships with the players when you were trying to be a little bit more standoffish, maybe personally?
I don't think so. I didn't know. Again, I don't know what my players are doing on Saturday nights still to this day. But I maybe joked a little bit more about things now, or I don't know. I still think I don't do a lot of things well, but I think one of my strengths is I can build relationships, or at least that they knew I cared about them. So maybe they weren't disclosing everything, but I think if they hit a crisis point in their life, even when I was 23, they knew I would help them and they knew I cared. So I think those are the big nuggets to have as a coach, that they need to know if something big goes down, is she going to have my back? And I think even at that age, I hopefully built that with them.
Let's get to that second piece that you said, that you cold called all the Nebraska folks trying to get, anybody with some credibility to come join. It
wasn't that bad. Come on.
Well, maybe it wasn't that bad, but I still love the idea, right? I mean, you viewed that as a way to accelerate your credibility building and maybe build the recruiting pipeline a little bit. Where did that idea come from?
Well, I was raised in Lincoln, so I had such an incredible respect for the Nebraska program. So I think it was just the fact that I knew what a great program it was. Terry Pettit had been a mentor of mine, still is a mentor of mine, who was the coach prior to John Cook and kind of the godfather of Nebraska athletics. So I just think, and honestly, it worked. I mean, one of our very first class, so I got there in February. We had one scholarship, so we picked up a kid quick. But our very first real class after that was, I think, 5 Nebraska kids. And one of our really good players said, and she'll joke about it to this day because, she's now a lawyer living in Colorado. She said, I came because I looked up to Angie Oxley so much. Like, she was my hero. So it did add some cachet. Angie played in all, she doesn't play now for us, but at the time she was a practice player a good portion of the time and set a tone in our gym. It was, I don't know if I knew what a good move it would be at the time, but it really did pay dividends for our program.
You talked about in your kind of hunt for assistant coaches and folks that could complement your skill sets and your strengths. Did you kind of self-identify what your strengths were? Did other people say, hey, Kirsten, this is where we think your strengths are, and this is where we think you need to round out the staff? How do you go through that process?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. And when I talk to new head coaches, I think I can't say that enough, because I think our natural tendency when you get a head coaching job is you're like, holy cow, I get to hire a person or 2 people. I'm going to hire my friends. How fun is this going to be? Right. And I see that a lot. And people hire people like themselves. I do think that I did look at myself and say, where are my deficiency? My deficiency is I was really, really ripe. I was an adequate trainer, but not a great trainer. I felt like I needed training. I needed some of that seniority, if you will, within our staff. So, but I think that evolves too. Now, I need youth on my staff, right? Because now I'm old and maybe I've developed in some areas, but I know I'm still not as strong in some areas. So I think one of the things to be great at anything, and this is any field, is the ability to 2 things. A, reflect on yourself and say, okay, I do this well and maybe I don't do this as well. And then B, being willing to listen to other people who can give you an honest evaluation of yourself and be open to that. And no one wants to hear you're not great at something, right? But I think to continue to move forward, we have to be open to hearing those things.
Has there been something in your career, a piece of feedback that someone's given you that struck you maybe differently than other feedback, where you said, this one really hurts?
Oh, this one really hurts. Okay. One that hurt was I had a player that lost a starting spot, and she went to the bench. She was a senior, and a kid that I had loved. And I think she had loved the program and had really, liked the coaching staff. And she was angry. It was very, very personal to her. And that's something that I try to be more proactive as an older coach of, let's not make this personal, right? Even though it's hard not to make it personal when you don't get the spot. So it became very personal. And one of her teammates was a leader on the team, and I was kind of consulting her. And the teammate was like, she hates you. She's not going to get over it. And so I chose the path of just kind of least resistance and didn't just kind of went on about my business and let her be, and didn't, I'd say hi to her and that was about it. Tried to coach her, but her body language was, I hate you, coach. And I let it be. And it was uncomfortable all year. And we get to the postseason meetings and she said, you gave up on me. You didn't talk to me anymore. You seemed like you didn't care. And I will never make that mistake again. So if a player is mad at me personally, I will not stop communicating and trying to show that I care, because I think in the long term, maybe they'll reflect and say, okay, now I get it. They might be 40 before they realize it. But the fact that I abandoned her is unforgivable. And that one stung pretty hard.
Kirsten, you have had an unprecedented run of consistent success in the program. I mean, 7 straight Big East regular season titles. What has enabled your consistency?
I get asked that, and I think our consistency is because our staff is consistent in what we do. I don't think we do anything that is like overly remarkable. I think we work hard every day. You will not see myself or my assistants take a day off and just sit and chat all day. Now, if we're chatting about important things, absolutely. But we're not going to show up to practice any day ever without a practice plan put together. We aren't going to do a recruit visit that's not put together. We're not going to ever go into a match unprepared. So it's the fact that you're trying to do the right things all the time. So that means, you have a good recruiting year, that should catapult you to have a better recruiting year the next year and work harder at what you're doing. So I think some of the consistency is just that we try to do the same, work hard all the time. We've been lucky. We've got a lot of remarkable players. So once you have good culture, you have to continue to cultivate it. It can change any day of the week. But, understanding that those players are teaching younger players, of what Creighton Volleyball is and how we train and how, the mentality on the court. So, we're trying to build off what we do. But I do think you can get comfortable. And it's a goal of ours to not get comfortable with what we're doing.
You mentioned planning and preparing for practice. You have a practice plan. Talk about that for a minute. I mean, people see a team practice at an elite level. Maybe from afar, they just think you're going through the motions. I mean, what goes into planning a practice?
Well, I think it's one of the most critical things you do, because if we have a bad practice, the first thing I do is usually blame myself and say, okay, what did I not set up to make it be successful? Now, with that said, I also use our assistants. If you come into our gym, you're hearing multiple voices. It's not a gym that I'm the only voice. So we've got lots of different voices, but if we've got a player out, that's going to affect things. So we try to make sure, that if we're spending 2 hours in the gym or however long we're spending in the gym, that it is useful, productive time for everything that we're doing. So if something's going on this court and that player's not involved, she's on another court, maybe she's just doing blocking footwork, or maybe she's working against a wall. But we want to make sure, each minute is used usefully. And I think that takes a lot of planning. And that's why if, my athletic trainer knows that if we have a player that's going to be out, the earlier we can know that information, if it's sickness or injury or, players maybe are late for class and that'll disrupt things. I'm not good at adjusting on the fly. My assistant, Angie, I'm like, panic. And she's much better at adjusting. But, I think that I spend a lot of time laying out practice, and then we review it as a staff and make adjustments to make sure that we're getting the best out of the time that we're on the court.
Can you feel it when there's like a great practice versus a good practice?
Yes. A lot of times when we don't have a great practice, I tie it, this is what I'll say. I'm always amazed how if a player is in a bad place mentally, And especially if it's an influential player, not even just a star player, but just, someone that carries a lot of cachet on the team, how it can affect the tenor of practice. So, we work really hard to not let that happen. So it could be a bad drill. There's different factors that can change a practice. But I do think usually if it's a bad practice, it's something mental going on. If it be, a player that's struggling, maybe they've been in a drill and they haven't been, they're struggling to get out of it and they're not handling it well. So we try to address, when I was a younger coach, I didn't understand that. And I didn't understand how to handle a kid that's going in the tank. I might just let it happen. And now I'm much more proactive of, hey, let's talk about this. This isn't the way that we can react, because if you react in game 2 like that in a match and can't dig yourself out, we're not going to be able to win a match, right? So we need to prepare them, to be more mentally resilient.
Part of one of the many things I think is interesting about your program, Kirsten, is the way the community has rallied around Creighton Volleyball. So you guys, moved into a new building, I think back in 2009. And since then, you've set attendance records. You've turned out hundreds of thousands of people to the Creighton Volleyball games. I would imagine that building that community has been an important part of selling Creighton Volleyball from a recruiting perspective and creating energy in the program. How did you go about building that community support for the program?
It is, and I'm not satisfied with it. So those are lots of positive comments, but I think we still need to get better in this front. But it's ground up stuff. So, just to give you a little history. So in 2003, they were drawing about 50. They were playing at a high school before I got here. So can you imagine recruiting to a Division I institution and saying, oh, we're going to play at the high school down the street? So we moved into a old 9,000 seat kind of old facility, but at least it was a home court. And we got a new marketing director when I arrived, and he was a go-getter. And the first thing he did was he started to sell tickets. And I always say this, there's too many programs that are giving away tickets. It means there's no value, in my opinion. So even though we weren't charging a lot, maybe we were charging $5 a ticket at the time, we could go to the clubs in town and say, hey, we've got a 2-for-1, or we'll give the players free tickets and the parents can get half price tickets. So it wasn't about making money. It was adding value to the product. So that was a big thing that we did. And then you're right. When we moved into the new facility, now we could create atmosphere, because now, we've got a venue that seats about 2,200. We can pack this thing. It is an atmosphere. And then we've been really aggressive with season tickets now. So we have about 1,800 season ticket holders. The challenge we run into now is that sometimes our season ticket holders don't get to the games and pass their tickets along. So sometimes we have empty seats that way. So that's been a big challenge that we're working with. But I think, things that we did is we try to get out into the community, so speaking to as many people, encouraging people to come out. And then our game day experience has to be great. So, not only does our team have to win, and that's a big part of getting fans to come out, but, we have a big video board. So we're doing interactive stuff, things in between games that are fun for people to be a part of, giveaways. So all that stuff that great marketing people do, I think are critical pieces to growing a fan base.
What are some of the goals ahead? You said you're not satisfied. Where are you going next with this community building?
Well, we need to be selling the place out. And, I think COVID caused some issues with that because, it's interesting. I had fans that for about half the year we were masked and half of it was optional. And when we were masking, you have some fans that are like, I'm not coming because I don't want to mask. And then on the flip side, you have fans that are saying, I'm not coming because you're not having mandatory masking. So you're going to lose. We don't need to go into that. There's different sides of the coin on this stuff. So, so you're going to have some people not happy about that. But, I think we want to get our players back into the community. So we always did autographs after the matches. That stopped in COVID. A lot of young kids, that is so exciting to get that one-on-one interaction, even if it's for 10, 15 seconds with a player. So we need to do those sort of things that we can make that fan experience the best it can be.
Kirsten, I want to get into a little bit of your years before Creighton and some of the things that maybe led you into coaching. So before Creighton, volunteer coach at the University of Iowa, the head coach at Kirkwood Community College in Cedar Rapids. While you were at Kirkwood Community College, my understanding is you wore a bunch of different hats. Small school, it wasn't enough just to coach volleyball. You needed to do some other things. You worked in human resources. You did some other things. Talk about that experience for a bit.
It was such a great experience. So my path is very different. I did go to Iowa. helped out there in a program that the coach got left mid-season. So, some opportunities there. But that opportunity, I was interim head coach when I was 22, the spring at the University of Iowa. So crazy, clueless, those poor players. I'm sure they were like, what was going on? But it was great on a resume. And that in turn is why I got the job at Kirkwood Community College. Didn't build that program. It was in good shape when I got there. I knew nothing about a junior college, but had the opportunity to do that. And you're exactly right. I was human resources coordinator. I loved it. Actually, I will say for a semester, I actually taught. I taught classes, did like resume building and interview stuff, that sort of class. And I actually enjoyed that quite a bit too. But this was a little bit more stable of consistent hours and things. So long story short, moved into human resources coordinator. And it was juggling a lot. And I didn't have a degree in that area, but had a lot of great mentors that helped. Very similar to what high school coaches are doing, because, high school coaches almost all are teaching or have some other full-time gig, and they're coaching on the side. Very similar to what those coaches are dealing with.
It's interesting, Kirsten, when I talk to entrepreneurs, a lot of them say, they start a company, they're the CEO of a company, but people forget that, oftentimes at the beginning, they were wearing a lot of different hats. They were running marketing, they were running sales, they were doing the accounting, they were doing this, they were doing that. And a lot of entrepreneurs have told me that going through that does a few things for you. One, it educates you on a lot of different aspects of that business or that industry. And two, it gives you this degree of empathy that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have for how other people see things and what other people have to deal with in different roles. Do you feel like there's some of that as you have kind of ascended, into the role you're in now?
Oh gosh, you nailed it. Especially the empathy part of how big those jobs are. So at Kirkwood, no strength and conditioning coach. And I never developed to be a great strength and conditioning coach, but understand how important it is. And now I'm fortunate to have someone much smarter than I am running it. We had an athletic trainer that came twice a week. So imagine that for a college program. Again, I have no expertise in this area, but I know how important it is. I was the academic advisor at Kirkwood, so we're doing study halls on the road. And I remember going to class sometimes to make sure a kid was going to class, things along those lines. So, you come to a Division I institution and the resources, in my opinion, are off the charts, that we have so many wonderful people. And I've been fortunate that I've had the same strength coach for 10 years and he's phenomenal. Even most Division I volleyball programs aren't, they're running through people a little bit. So the continuity there is huge. Our academic advisor has been the same one since I've gotten here and she's amazing. We've got a full-time athletic trainer that's with our program. So, and I hope we are grateful to them of all things. I hope that they know how much I appreciate them. I try to tell that often. And I try to make sure our athletes understand how lucky they are and make sure that they show their gratitude to those people.
Well, Kirsten, it can't even today be all championships and glory. There has to be some gritty, unglamorous things, happening behind the scenes that maybe people don't get to see. What are some of the other things that maybe you're doing or your staff are doing that people don't necessarily get to see, but have a huge impact on Creighton Volleyball's success?
Well, I think the first thing I want to say leading into that question is it isn't all rainbows and butterflies all the time. And I always try to tell young coaches, I had so many times I thought I was getting out of this because I thought I was bad at it. I had players upset or, I didn't handle something well, or why did we have a bad practice? I don't know how to train, all these question marks of, can I do this? And it's a hard industry. And so I think sometimes we get on these things and people think, oh, it just came easily and it's easy for them. And it isn't easy and it's emotionally hard. And the hardest thing for me is, I've got, anywhere from 14 to 17 players on my team on a given year, and all of them want to play and they're not all going to play. And I don't like to disappoint people. And that is by far the hardest part of doing this. So I think it's really important that people recognize that there's always issues. There's always people that maybe aren't happy that you're trying to figure out. So now, okay, so remind me, that wasn't your question, but you led into that. And I think that's important to say.
Well, I think that's an important piece of it, but there also are kind of unglamorous things that go on, are just these nitty gritty things that, if you don't maybe you could, not do this, not do that. But if you do a lot of these little things, they add up to big success. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's just so many big things that can't be dropped, right? So, or maybe, so many little things that can't be dropped. So like our itinerary has to be put together very, very well. You can't have a shuttle driver not show up. You can't forget a kid's birthday on social media. I'm trying to think of other things, you got to make sure that the little things are done. We had marketing for a while do social media birthday posts, and they forgot a couple. And I said, done, we're doing them, because we cannot forget that type of things, because it hurts kids' feelings. And people will talk about that you don't care about me. So you on my practice plan. So if we've got a kid, I'm on the birthday front right now, but we always sing to athletes on their birthday at practice. Well, that is the type of thing I would forget. So I always write it at the top of my practice plan so we don't forget. And I was actually just talking to a coach that got written up because they forgot to tell a kid happy birthday. And it's not because you don't care. You just got a lot of things going on. So just being really diligent about the little things, writing yourself notes, not forgetting things. The other thing that we do as a staff is we try to remind each other. So we all have it on calendars of different things. Maybe it's a surgery. I had a player that had surgery last week. I don't just remember that. We all circulate that amongst our staff. So all of us are making sure we're making that touch point with our student athletes to let them, we do care, but there's a lot of people to manage. And so even if you care a lot, you forget things. So you got to have people helping so those things don't get dropped.
I'm curious, when did you realize that you wanted to be a coach? Was this something from childhood that you always wanted to do?
No, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got out of undergrad, wasn't sure. I'd spent a semester at the Department of Higher Education in Missouri doing an internship. I moved away for a spring semester my junior year and thought I wanted to be on the academic side. So like a dean or a president or, something on the academic side at a college level. So my master's is actually in higher education administration. And then I did the volunteer thing on the side and liked coaching and just kind of landed it. And I think now I'm finally to the point I'm like, okay, I want to be a coach. But I think 10 years ago, I still was like, do I want to coach? I don't know. So, and I always say, people say, how long do you want to coach? And I always say, until I don't like it or the athletes don't like me, which maybe there's many that don't anyway, but till I know that they want me out, then I'll go, do something else.
That's incredible. You're at this at Creighton 19 years, I think. And you mentioned, 10 years ago, you were still trying to figure out if you wanted to be a coach. It's a great lesson to anybody. You've had such a great run of success, Kirsten. You mentioned mentors a little bit before. Is there somebody that you credit most with your success?
I think this is a really big thing. And I actually tweeted about this recently. So when I got hired at Creighton, Terry Pettit, again, started Nebraska volleyball. He was the coach prior to John Cook. And he was hired by our AD to help him with the search. So Terry was one of the names that recommended me among some other names. And when I got hired, Bruce Rasmussen, my AD, I had the same AD. He just retired in August for my entire career. Best AD in the country. Incredible. I can't tell you how. So he was definitely a mentor, but he paid Terry Pettit to mentor me for the first couple of years. Now, Terry Pettit still mentors me, but I think I'm this young coach. I'm not ready for this gig. And Creighton invested money to help me navigate and learn. And everyone says, go get a mentor. And I totally agree. Go get a mentor. But what paying someone did was have someone truly invested in the program. We talked regularly. He watched film. He actually, early in my days, came in and watched me coach some so that he could give me feedback. And especially as a young coach, I can't tell you how valuable that was. So Terry Pettit has definitely been a huge mentor. And then I have a lot of other people that I, for different things I reach out to. Even within our department, our women's basketball coach, Jim Flannery, has been here the entire time I've been here. And we office. He's right through that wall in front of me. And he's been, when I'm struggling, he's the one that I often go to. And, just a really great man. And I've learned a lot from him too. A lot among many, many others for sure.
How cool is that? The concept that Creighton, obviously making an investment in you, continues to make that investment by bringing on by paying someone to mentor you early on. They saw your potential, but they also recognized that they needed to invest to help you reach that potential. That is really, really neat.
Really cool. And you don't hear of it happening. I think you hear it in the business world, like CEO coaches, but I've yet to meet anyone. Well, that's not true. I have met a couple, but very few, especially I think it's a lot of times initiated by the coach, but this being initiated by our athletic director to get me a mentor, I just think is really special.
Yeah, even in the business world, it doesn't happen as much as it should. Sure. But you see some executive coaches, but that's something that we'll have to come back to in a part 2 one day.
That's
Kirsten
right.
Bernthal Booth, this has been so much fun. There's no question you are pulling the tarp out at Creighton. Thank you for spending some time with me this week, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Instagram at AndrewMoses123 and sign up for my monthly email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.